what contribute on society.
Welcome to the African Experience Podcast, your podcast for fascinating discussions, stories, and interviews from the diaspora. Your hosts, two ordinary Africans.
Hello, fellas. Welcome again to another episode of the African Experience Podcast. I am Abdul Hafiz.
And I am Yakubu Ali.
Great to have you back listening to us. We really appreciate it. We've had amazing support from our listeners, great feedback so far, and we hope we can deliver more content, and we hope we can make you interested in the African experience. Yeah, Yakubu, so how have you been, man?
It's been great. And as you said, the feedback from our listeners is excellent, and it pushes us to continue doing what we are doing.
Great.
With all the difficulties during the coronavirus pandemic. I think this is a very effective way of using our times, and thanks to our listeners, it's becoming a very interesting platform.
Very good, interesting. I actually was thinking about something. I was thinking now and again we should introduce some personalities. Bear with me. So I was watching a video about this amazing, it's a story about a German-based Ghanaian doctor. I don't know if you've seen a video like that.
Not yet.
His name is Samuel Okai, right?
A Ghanaian, I guess.
Yeah, a Ghanaian doctor. And he is actually building a 130-bed hospital.
Wow.
Alone.
Wow.
Yes, he started building it when he started medicine in Germany, around 18, 19 years old. So this man has been building hospitals ever since he started. He started medicine in Germany. So you can imagine someone around 18, 19 seeing a vision of 15 years to come.
Wow.
Right. I forgot some of his story, but I think he started building it out of his own pocket. And till today, he has raised up to around 400,000 euro. I don't really remember the exact amount. And thankfully now people have recognized what he's doing, and they're actually donating to help him build this hospital. Yeah.
I said it before, like, if anything is going to come to Africa, any change, it will come from the Africans in the diaspora. Look at all this. That's wonderful.
I mean, when I was thinking about it, a lot of things came to mind, right? So I was thinking, if just one person, one man, one visionary young man, now I think he's clocking around 40 years old now. I hope we can, I don't know, in some ways find his contact and actually...
We have to find him.
Yeah.
We have to listen to his story.
Bring him to the podcast, 100%. So I was thinking to myself, if one person, one visionary young man can actually think to do such an amazing job with... I mean, over 15 years, yes, he's raised a lot of money. But you can imagine a whole country not being able to build something like this. It doesn't make sense, right?
That is quite unfortunate. And that's the situation we find ourselves in Africa. People, or let's say our leaders, are not ready and committed to doing all these things, which is their responsibility in the first place because they are voted into those positions
Yeah.
to do all this. So first of all, we have to look at them to see whether they are doing the right thing, and then we'll look at the people who, like him, who are doing it out of the love for the country or the continent. That's excellent, and we need these kind of people.
Okay, very good. Actually, very interesting you talked about our leaders. It's a nice segue into today's episode.
Yeah.
Our leaders, do we consider them African? That's a good question.
You're going to put yourself in trouble.
No, it's a genuine question,
Yes.
in my opinion.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
a genuine question.
The African identity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's when you were just talking about the leaders, it's just clicked. I mean, are we going to consider them African? We will talk about. Hopefully, we can figure out something to say about this
Yes.
with regard to this in the coming minutes. Yeah. So our episode today is going to be mainly about the African identity. It's a very interesting question. It sounds simple. The African identity. Who is an African? Who do we consider an African? Or do we have criteria that are put? Is it by us or by the continent itself to give people the title of being Africans or being
Or
not Africans?
real Africans, as some people say.
Yeah, or we can. You get me? Yeah. So who is an African? Let me start with you, Yakub. Actually, who is an African in your opinion?
Personally, I think it's a very tricky question
Yeah.
because imagine a continent of 55 countries and closer to 2 billion people, if not more, and more than 2,000 different languages. To kind of put all this together, of course, with the name, we call ourselves Africans because we come from the African continent. But does that mean like all of us need to act, speak, behave, think, and believe in the same way? I think no. And some people also might say, and I hear it a lot, like, are you a real African?
Are you
You are
African
not.
enough?
Yeah, you are not African enough,
Yeah.
or he is not a real African. And as I said, there are so many possible responses to this question.
Very interesting.
It is absolutely and quite, it's really complicated
It is.
for us to define who is the real African. And it's a kind of hard hit to someone who was born by African immigrant somewhere who never stepped his feet on the continent to be asked whether he is a real African or not, or someone who has left the motherland for quite a long time to be asked, are you a real African or not? So personally, I think it's quite tricky, and we have to be careful the way we refer to ourselves and other people from the continent.
Very good. It's true. It's very true. For me, so we are worried, or we're always, I don't know, pressured to define terms. I think this is where the problem lies. To try to put people in a certain box.
Yes.
That is where the problem lies. I mean, so for example, to me, if you're talking about African, are you talking about it in a social way, in a social constructive way, or are you talking about it in a more biological way, right, or in a more physical sense? Because those are two legit questions, I think, and it's very difficult to actually boil them into one sentence or even one book, right?
Yes.
There are, to me, there are a lot of ways of being African. There are a million ways of being African. So, would we consider someone born in Africa an African? Yes. Will we consider a Western African an African? Yes. South, East, North, Central. We all consider all these part of Africa, don't we? So, is this the only thing that defines a person as an African? I think not. Even in some ways, somebody who is from this part of Africa might not be African, right? So, will we, for example, when you talk about African, there is this typical picture. So people like you and I is what actually people see. The Bantoid, the Bantu typical African, and that's not necessarily a whole concept, right? That's not necessarily a whole picture of the African continent. People in the north part of Africa, the Arabs, the Amazighs, or mostly known as the Berbers, the Pygmies. If you go to the eastern part of Africa, the Kushites, the Oromos. You go to the south, the Khoi people, the Khoisans, Zulu people. Who is an African? The Nilotic people. Who is an African?
Yes.
Right. Even in South Africa, if you go to South Africa, the white, Caucasian,
and
Asian people, are they African? That's the question. Who is an African?
Yeah, I think we have to ask the question of a definition. Do we have a definition for the word African? Because the question takes this or assumes a very stark and unchangeable definition of an African, and all of us have to fit in. If you don't fit in, then you are not the real African. In quotes. So I agree with you. It takes a very different and even more dimensions than the way we think it is, and it's beyond being born in Africa or outside Africa. I remember Nkrumah was once saying, like, we are not Africans because we are born in Africa, but we are Africans because Africa is born in us. So how do you define an African? This gives a broad definition of what an African is. So it's really a tricky question, as I said.
Yeah, so if you ask me, I think, you see, all these people we mentioned, we've talked about the people, different type of ethnic groups, whoever these people are. Even we can include people in the diaspora, right? This is actually kind of an extension of the African diaspora episode we did. And if you haven't listened to it, you can go back and actually listen to it, then come back and listen to this. It's very interesting, like what you said about Kwame Nkrumah. So now, we as Africans, like you said, we don't necessarily need to put ourselves in the box, right?
Of course.
There is a reason we are the north part and the sub-Saharan part, right? So, and mostly when people are talking is that picture, the sub-Saharan part of Africa. The question here isn't necessarily that, like, do you consider north or whatever parts African? The question originally comes when we ask if there can be a common African identity. Can there be a common African identity? That is the question.
Difficult.
Yeah, very difficult. I feel like we will finish this episode with more questions
than answers.
Yes. But it's good to raise questions. At least we can start tackling it slowly, right?
But where do we start when we say Africa, when we look at the continent? Because when you go into the international relation, they have something called the MENA, which is the Middle East, and the North Africa.
Yeah.
When they are discussing about the politics in the Middle East, they kind of include the countries in the northern part of Africa. But geographically, we are all in the same place. In the same place.
Yeah.
So if we talk of a common identity that covers everybody in Africa, including Madagascar, what kind of identity can that be? Yeah. Sometimes I think of the common destiny that we have with the common past history. When you look at almost all the countries in Africa, experience exploitation, slavery, and colonization.
Interesting.
With only few of them who were able to resist. That's, I think, Ethiopia. Each one is one.
In a sense, yeah.
In a sense, if you bring all these things together, maybe we can say yes, we have similar past because we have to fight to gain our independence and freedom. And then we also have similar destiny, which is of making Africa a great continent, coming together, being one, having common currency and common trade areas. So we kind of say, yeah, we have a lot of things in common. But when it comes to identity, which has to be with culture and the way we look at the world and religion and all these things, there's so much disparities between us, especially when you take the northern part of Africa, the sub-Saharan Africa. There's a lot of differences, especially when it comes to even the governmental or in terms of democracy and the way the countries are ruled. It's different. So I am trying to find a way or how we can have this singular identity, which personally I think can also be problematic to kind of put people in this kind of to bring us in a certain kind of one identity, like we all have to be the same, speak the same, act the same, wear the same. It's not good for me personally. So I think, yes, you can have an identity, but sometimes it can be problematic, I think.
I think with all what you said, I think the proper question is pursuing one African identity. Number one, is it viable? Number one, is it viable to pursue? Two, is it more advantageous to Africans than otherwise? What do you think? I'm putting on your spot here, but yeah, what do you think?
I think we can have one goal, one dream.
Okay.
But in terms of identity, we have different identity. As you mentioned, the different tribes and ethnic groups we have, they all have something special of themselves. Look at the Zulus, the way they dance, the way they speak, the Xhosa. When you go to Ghana, the Asantis, the Ewes, the Hausas in Nigeria, and so many other peoples around in the African continent. It's applying this singular identity to the entire continent or the entire race or the entire ethnic group. For me, I think it's problematic because as human beings, we are so different and we live a complicated life full of contradictions. That makes it almost impossible to categorize or put or give people this singular identity. And I think personally, this complication and contradictions that we have brings about some of the greatest innovations and works we see today.
Yeah.
Because we are different, and the more we accept and agree that we are different, it helps us when it comes to innovating, bringing in new things, scientifically, socially, economically. But if we think the same, then I think there will be no development, because we have to act, think, behave in the same way,
Yeah.
which I think is going to even draw us back.
Interesting. Very
But
interesting.
this, it also has its positive signs, because the more I identify with you, the more I'm willing to work with you, the more I'm willing to help you. Look at the gentleman we talked about in Germany who was trying to build hospitals. He identified himself with a certain group of people, and that encourages him to do what he is doing. But if I say no, identity is not important to me, then I can live individually, then I think I'm heading towards my distraction, honestly.
Very, very true. Very, very true. Yeah. So what I think it is we don't have to be the same people, right? But we have to chase a certain kind of identity, right? So, for example, we always use the Europeans as an example, right? So who is do you say a European? Who is a European? You can I feel like it's also the same kind of problem, but because of how, especially things like the European Union works or have worked over the years, it's not as big of a problem as it is in Africa.
That even with them, when I ask you who is European to you, how do you define an European?
So it's a person from Europe.
Yes,
right?
so we can just say someone from Africa is
Yeah.
an African. But when it comes to identity, which I think it goes beyond just being in Africa,
Yes.
because there are some people who have never stepped foot in Africa.
Absolutely, absolutely.
There are
So
people in the diaspora. How do we describe them?
yeah, so that's also the question, right? We keep asking the question over and over. So
Yeah.
I feel like because we try to put ourselves in a certain box, in a certain, when you're going to fill a form, then you're asked, those white, black, or Afro Americans.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like we're trying to put ourselves in a box so that we can tick. But I think that is the problem, trying to do that. So
Yes.
we can have, so number one, in my opinion, we should have a certain concept of identity. Why? You made mention of our history, colonization. So it's in our advantage to actually chase after a certain African identity, because it will help us at least have a certain goal, even though we are not the same people. I'm not talking about a romantic one African country. I mean, that's in my opinion, that's really impossible. But that's also a question for another day. When we come to what we're talking about today, right, the identity, it takes on different forms: culture, society, politics, and everything like that. We need to have, especially with the world we're living in, a one economical political goal, for example. This is a good place to start, right? I don't know if you've heard of the Ubuntu philosophy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, not that I have a lot of information about or I know much about that, but I know it's kind of like helping each other regardless of
Our differences.
our differences or the person, right? So I think one quote says, "A person is a person through other people."
Of course.
Right.
Sociologically, that's it.
So
You are not, everything about you is shaped because of the society you come from.
absolutely. So the goodness, the kindness, the one goal would at least be that identity, right? And this would include people in the diaspora, right? People
Exactly.
in Africa. Maybe, honestly, I've been thinking about this. So, what would you say about a person who was born in Africa, has never traveled, never done anything, but he hates the continent? And a person, it's a very legit question.
It's very, very legit.
And a person who was born or who isn't physically African, right?
Meaning who is not on the continent.
Who is not on the continent, who when you see them you never say, "Hey, this guy is an African." No, that will be the 100th thing that comes into your head, right? And that person Africa is very dear to the person. The person tries as much genuinely, right? I'm not talking about the fake ones.
Yes, we have a lot of them.
Yeah, genuinely trying to make a change, trying to help African. Who among these two different people is an African? That's also a question. you get me, right? That is also a question.
A very, very confusing question.
Absolutely. So, in my opinion, this other one isn't an African, right? This one in Africa who doesn't like the continent. I mean, for one reason or the other. Yes. I don't know, right? That's the thing. So the concept of being one person, one people with one culture, I think is flawed in the first place. What do you think? That's my honest opinion.
I'm thinking about so many things. You've taken over my mind.
Yeah.
Yes, and what you said, we have a lot of people in Africa who literally, as you said, they don't like being there. They sometimes wish like I'm a white man. Like you are right. And we also meet, especially a lot of us, those of us who are living outside the continent, we meet so many people. You can see the genuine interest in Africa. Like the person is really interested in Africa. So who can we call an African here? I'll go back to what Nkrumah said. That means the Africa is born in that person, since he's willing to help the continent. But it's quite unfortunate that as we are trying to come together, and the identity issue too, I think, is very important, because maybe that's the reason why we are not able to come together as the European Union are doing. Because for us, I think if we don't come together, we have no chance.
No,
we have no chance at all. For us to be able to come together, we need something that can bring all of us together.
Yeah.
And can this identity be that thing that we need?
So identity, right? You have these ID cards, right? Like everyone has this national ID card or school ID that shows you belong to so and so school or so and so country, right? That is not what we're talking about here, right?
Yes.
What we're talking about is a whole different concept. It's a much more abstract concept.
Yes.
So we should have a certain goal in mind.
Or can we say an idea or a belief?
Absolutely, because human beings always are propelled by a certain belief, a certain goal, even though they do not necessarily meet that goal. But at the very least, it's like they have what drives them. So as Africans, that specific goal could, like I said, could could start from a common economic goal, which what's the name? Is it the AFCT? It's a very weird name. AFCTA?
The African
Continental something free trade or something.
Yes.
You see, that's in theory, right, is a very lofty idea. It's a very amazing goal, right? But
you think it's not viable?
No, absolutely viable. It's absolutely viable because when you put it in theory, you can actually see how it could work and benefit Africa. But unfortunately, when we go back into history and when we come down to reality, right, is a very, very difficult proposition.
Why is it difficult? So we are talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Yeah,
that's what we're referring to, yes.
Absolutely.
So why do you think it's difficult for us to achieve something like this?
Very good.
Because I am an absolute believer that it's possible.
Possible doesn't mean...
It's different from doable.
Not really. So the opposite of possible is impossible, right? And I'm not saying it's impossible. We're just saying it is difficult, right? If it weren't difficult, we would have already done it already, right? It's so difficult that we can actually see, for example, for me, I think it's a very good goal to actually chase. But if anyone is in the mind frame of this utopic African free trade, whatever, you just get up here and then go to South Africa and do your business and come back and go to Nigeria and go to Congo. That is in itself the issue. So I give you an example. If you go to the Republic of Congo, the southeastern part of Congo, that is where Congo is really rich. Actually, some people say it is where God, Hasha, God dropped his wallet. That is what they say.
That's how rich it is.
The border between, I think it's Congo, Zambia, and Rwanda, something like that. It's a very rich part of Africa. And this is also a topic for another day. We will talk about that. But that place is so complicated. Africans around that place are not willing to make it work for one another. They're all Rwanda, Zambia, Congo. I can tell you, someone in the northern part of Congo cannot easily travel to that place. But someone in Rwanda can just take one road directly to inside Congo, where it's not their country. And it has been like this since the colonial days. And other countries are taking advantage of it. They're taking advantage of Congo in a sense. And we consider ourselves brothers, right? African, we're family, the Ubuntu we just talked about. But we still doing this to one another. If you go to Kenya, there's a dispute of between Kenya and Somalia. There's this land sea dispute. If these petty, small, they're not petty, they're really big. If these small but very important things are not resolved, how can we have a free trade agreement? Right, that is why. But I'm not saying it's impossible. It is definitely possible, and it's a good thing we are actually talking about it, and it's a good thing we are aiming for that. But how, if we don't resolve these small things, these arguments, these disputes between countries, how are we going to have a free trade agreement?
You are absolutely right. And I think the African Union too are not doing enough.
That's not an organization, bro.
to of course the ideas are still
I
ideas are
understand.
still there,
Yeah.
but we need to make it a workable organization with the help of Africans in the diaspora, because since Chinese can sponsor, the American stuff, the France can sponsor African Union, the Africans in the diaspora too can do the same,
That
and then they can
not
have power.
not to cut you short, bro. Some people listening to this, or especially listening to me, would think, "Who is this pessimistic?
Pessimist.
Who is this pessimistic brothers
African
talking?"
living outside the continent and saying all this rubbish.
Yeah, but
But we have to face the reality, right?
absolutely, we have
You
to
have
be
to be pragmatic
pragmatic.
sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's it. You continue.
We can always be, as you said, romantic about things, but what is on the ground is the reality. For instance, the pact for the continuation of colonization that was implemented by France on the French countries. It's something that is in existence.
That is crazy to think
You
about.
understand? And without it being uplifted, a lot of things cannot happen.
No.
You understand? So what you're saying, even though it's painful to hear, it's painful to say, not a lot of people will have the courage like you to be saying all these things, but that's the reality.
It
And
is.
if we are really interested in the development and the upliftment of Africa, then we have to face our reality.
Definitely.
And we have to face it heads up.
Absolutely.
And I agree with a lot of things that you say, even though I also agree with the doability of the African continental free trade, whatever. But still, we have to look at the reality and make sure that we can do it. Do you think, like, going back to this identity issue, like Africa in itself, has become marketable. Like, it's now a brand.
Yeah.
So to call yourself an African, you kind of attract a certain kind of interest and attention, and you'll be able to sell yourself. So always people are trying to impose, or they impose it on ourselves, or we impose it on other people. We look at them, we say this person is not black enough to be African, or this person is too black to be African. So you kind of don't know who is an African then. But don't you think it's also now becoming marketable, or it's now a brand people use a lot in so many places?
Oh my God. I don't know even where to begin, bro. The truth is, we never actually understood who we are.
Yeah.
So that was where it started from. And now that we're beginning in the slightest form, and I really mean that, in the slightest form, to actually understand who we as Africans are, some people are getting delusional. Some people are taking it out of proportion.
Romantic.
Yes.
Romanticizing everything.
Everything. Some people are capitalizing on this. Really capitalizing on this.
They use it to sell themselves.
Absolutely. You can actually, even without them, not even selling themselves, but promoting this kind of Africanism, Afrocentrism, which also another problem. We will talk about that in another day. It has become this brand that people initially, or like maybe even 50 years ago, people were shy to say they were African. For you and I, in this country, we have actually met people who try to be more Black American. Not to say anything against that or against
Being
Black
Black
Americans, than being African. But now it's like the total opposite. People are more inclined or do not hesitate one bit to call themselves an African. In many ways, that's great that people are actually embracing.
You can come out of the shell.
Yes. So, and in other ways, when you talk about branding, marketableness is there. It's not a bad thing. If I was a marketer, if I had a product, right, I'd prefer it to be to have a target market, right? So if an African is going to make a brand, and this is very important, it should be an African, right? No third party or third entity should come from outside and then pretend to be African. That is the problem also. So if Africans want to market who they are, want to make it a brand in every sense of the word, it can be in actual marketing material way, or
as far as you don't exclude other people based on your definition of who an African is.
Exactly. So this also applies to the north part of Africa. So our African brothers and sisters there, now they also have started to accept the fact that they are in this continent. They've been in this continent for thousands of years, and some of them, especially if you go to the north part of Africa, the Amazighs, the Berbers, they're not from outside. They are African, right? Is because maybe they're probably a little lighter than your ordinary African.
Sub-Saharan African.
Yes, they decided in a very long time ago to kind of exclude themselves. But now even them, people, and we like that they're coming back, right? And we also have to accept that they are African. Some of us also like, no, they are Arabs. Yes, they are Arabs, but they are African. Just like how we are, or whatever ethnic group we are, whatever language we speak, but yet still we are African.
Yes. But can someone deny his Africanism, if I can say, like the issue of choice? Can that also be applied to African? Can someone claim to be an African? I am an African, and we just have to respect the person, wherever that person is coming from. Or are there some qualities, even though, yes, we respect your choice, but there are some things, my friend, yes, you can claim to be African, but I'm sorry, you are not. Can we say that? And can someone deny his Africanism? Like, yes, I'm black, I'm from Africa, but I'm not African.
All right, so that's a loaded question. That is because exactly what we're talking about. Is it a social construct? So those who say African or Africanism or being an African, or you get me, is a social construct. Those people might agree, because it's a social construct, which almost everything now with the philosophers we have these days is a social construct. Being an African also. So there are actually two types of people. They're actually real people and delusional people. I'm not saying who you are, but you are on one.
Just listen to us and choose for yourself.
So you can actually, it's like being a little kid, right? And then saying, I'm a 90 years old man.
Yes.
Right? So you see...
You say, come on, lad, you are being delusional.
Exactly. So there are people like that. So if we come to the social construct part, like what Kwame Nkrumah said, then we can actually have a criteria. If we're going to take that as a criteria, we could take that, yes, okay, this person who in the heart is an African, likes Africa, wants Africa to prosper genuinely, is an African, this person who's born in Africa doesn't like the continent, doesn't want its prosperity, our leaders are not African. So we can use that.
You have to be bold.
Exactly.
My friend, you are not an African. I'm sorry you were born in Africa.
We can also come to the real biological part, physical part of it. When you're born in Africa, you have no other choice. You are an African in that sense. But in the heart...
Isn't this being a paradox? Like the guy, the gentleman or whoever, a person is born in Africa or was born in Africa, but he doesn't have the love for Africa. So we look at him and say, my friend, it's quite unfortunate we were born in Africa that you don't have the love for the continent.
Yeah.
So you are not an African. But later we say, as long as you are born there, you are an African.
Yes, that's the physical part. Yeah. So you can tell the person, look, you're an African, but you're not an African.
You're not an African.
You see, that also, because one word, especially in English, one word could mean
so many things.
So, yeah. Very
so can we have a definition, an unbiased, objective definition about who an African is?
No.
It's quite impossible.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Or extremely difficult.
We don't have to. We don't have to have that one shoe fits all definition. We don't have. We have to agree that everybody wears different size.
Of course.
So, like a Caucasian, Afrikaans, those South Africans, Caucasian South African, white South African, right? And this person is really has embodied the Africanness, has really wants the prosperity of the continent, and like the people, isn't trying to be something else. That person is an African. That person could be more African than Kwame. Hey, sorry for any Kwame listening in Ghana, who isn't the same, who doesn't want to. So that person is an African, yes. Maybe you might say that problem would arise if dual citizenship problem arises. So if the person is, for example, Indian and South African, who is this person? Is he an African? Is he an Indian? If there is a conflict, God forbid, there is a war between India and Africa, South Africa.
Who is the person?
Who will the
going
person
to support?
Yes. So that's also the problem. That is why I say we don't have to have one single dictionary definition of African, right? A Black American could be African.
What about the issue of native? Once I had some discussion with some friends. I told them we were talking about the English language.
Yeah.
I said I am not a native English speaker, and I've never called myself such. So, can we also say we have some native Africans? Looking at the example you gave, someone who was born in South Africa, whose parents or grandparents came from India or any Asian country, that we can say this guy is not a native African. Or we can't qualify anything. There is nothing like that. We don't have any definition for that. So we should put that aside too. Or we have a definition to Africans whose grandparents or parents or great-grandparents were born in Africa. We say these people are native Africans. Can we say that?
Okay, so let's go by the definition. Let me actually pull out the definition of native so that I can get the exact wording. So the dictionary here says a native. Native is a person born in a specified place or associated with a place by birth, whether subsequently resident there or not. So, if we are
then we
going,
can say there is a definition for native Africans.
yes,
Now it's not the issue of an African. You are a native African.
Exactly.
Then we can divide people.
Yes. I
Good.
guess so.
Now we finally settle on this. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the program.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yes.
So,
I see.
by this definition, absolutely. You're born there, then you are a native of that land. But are you a person of that land, personality-wise, visionary-wise? I don't know, are you emotionally connected to that place? That's is what we've been talking about. There is no problem. We have native Africans.
Yes.
All right, we have native Africans.
But why can't we come together with all this? I know this is a very loaded question too. There are so many different factors that are in play which cause Africans to be divided day in, day out. What is our own? What are we doing on our own that is preventing us from coming together? Or is everything externally?
That's, human beings, we feel comfortable.
Because the Europeans, they fought brutally. They killed themselves. They destroyed so many parts of those places called Europe. But still, they were able to come together. They are human beings. We are human beings. God didn't create us, or maybe He created us different.
He created but to know one another, to know each other.
Yes, since these people, regardless of their differences, can come together, achieve extraordinary things, why can't we do it?
It comes back to the one goal, one economic, entertainment, political goal. Because the European Union, there are some countries in Europe, in continental Europe, who aren't part of the European Union, right? But are they not European? They are continental European.
And they are proud of it as well.
And they should be. Everyone should be proud of where they're from. But if it comes to Africans and why we cannot come together, we can come together, but why haven't we been able to come together? Is it external? Is it internal? Is it spiritual? Is whatever the case might be? We have had differences as people for so long. Even people living in a small square space, in a small country, have different people in that country, right? Most, I'd say, of the issue is within ourselves. But that doesn't mean there aren't external factors actually, external obstacles preventing us being together or coming together. There are. We know, it's not a secret that there are people who that doesn't actually meet their goal, right? If Africans come together, there are superpowers. We know them. This is not something to hide, or it's not a conspiracy or whatever. It's not. It's real that there are some people who the continual detrimentation, undevelopment of Africa actually benefits them. There's some people in the continent who benefit from that. And unfortunately, those who benefit and those who benefit are the powerful. They are the powerful, right? And the people themselves, we talked about education, right? The people themselves haven't been given the opportunity to actually explore this.
To understand the importance of coming together.
To
feel it, to see it, to enjoy it.
what is the atasöz? What's atasöz?
It's just saying.
What is the saying in Ghana when I think most African countries have that when they say if you have one broom, it's easier to break.
Yeah,
something like that.
It's easy to break a single
Uh-huh.
broom, but if you bring them together, it's hard to break.
It's harder to break. We have that saying, but we never implement that kind of saying.
But you said something very, very profound about the European Union. We have continental Europeans and we have the European Union. And in so many cases, they cooperate and they do so many things to help the continent. Someone once told me, like, since we can't come together, the African Union, they started it with the African Unity 1963 or 64. Up to today, we couldn't achieve so many aims and goals that were put in place. Why don't we let go of this organization and then do something like the European Union? Whoever we have a goal and aim, any country who is interested in this should come. Let's start it. Let's do it. If anyone wants to join, we vet the country and then we either accept or reject the country. Why are we wasting ourselves feeding an organization that is not working for us? So do you think like we should let go of the African Union and then do something like the European Union? Yes, we can have continental African countries, but not necessarily part of the certain new group that will be created among African groups who can do this. Is that possible, viable, doable?
Wow, okay. So,
because sometimes to make people work, sometimes there should be conditions, serious conditions.
Yeah, you shouldn't be privileged just because you're African, right?
Yes. Imagine an African country who wants to join the European Union. Let's say they open up for any country who wasn't. There are rules and regulations.
Absolutely.
If you are able to obey it, then you will be accepted. Forget about all the history we share together and the past and the future. Okay, we understand that, but we want to make things work. If you are not interested in that, stay away. You are our friend.
Look at Turkey. Yes. For how long?
They've been trying to enter the European Union, but they still,
I mean, there are rules the country itself wouldn't agree to if they joined the European Union. And European Union also do not want to accept them for some other reasons.
Yes.
But economically, they are good enough to get into.
They buy from Europe, they sell to Europe, and they are getting a lot of money from there.
Yeah. So
you don't have to necessarily be part of the organization.
If you want to do,
even though it has its own advantages.
If you want to do a trade with Europe, you just have to have certain certificates like the ATR or Euro 1, whatever.
Yes.
And then you're good to go, right? So
So do you think the African Union is a waste of time?
No.
Resources?
Okay, so the African Union as a union is needed if it's going to work properly, right? If it's going
the institution has already been put in there.
Yes.
That is the problem we have is the working. It's working.
Implementation, exactly. Yes. So the hard work has already been done. I mean, that part of the hard work has already been done. Now is up to Africans to wake up. Look, we're not here we're not talking about making United States of Africa. That's not what we're talking about. That's like really, really lofty. We're talking about actually understanding the need to have a union, a workable union, right? So that we can prevent things like the Rwandan genocide. Or we can prevent things like what
the Al-Shabaab, the Boko Haram,
Liberia,
the coups that are happening, the coup d'etat.
Exactly. We need something like that. So as the African Union itself, it's only an entity, right? It's us who actually make it happen and make it work properly. So we do not necessarily need to have Africans who are interested to come and then, maybe that will be another issue. Would you now wake up to say we need to overhaul everything, the ethos of the African? No.
That is going back to zero.
Exactly.
It will be difficult for us to build another one.
We should just be mindful of what the problems are and try to get real people, real Africans with African identity, with the concept of being an African, to the big places of the continent. That is how, because the ones we have in now, bro, I don't think they are. Evidently, they're not enough. They're not good enough
at all. Yes.
Yeah. So one more thing. Recently, about voting for the African Union chairman, it's also another problem, and we will have time to talk about it. I recently heard a lady talking about it. Hopefully, I can get to her in some ways.
We can invite her to the program.
Let's see, man.
Yeah, the issue regarding the African identity will always be discussed. It will continue to be talked about. I don't know if we were able to handle it well.
I mean, we will not be able, because there are people, to be honest, who are more intellectual or who are more capable in this sense than us, but we will try our best. This is also a way to actually bring such problems into reality, so that we can talk about it. We can try as much as we can to bring forth the problem. So what we've realized now is not having an African identity. We already have an African identity. There is African identity. But what it is, how to implement it, how to actually make it advantageous for the continent and its people is the issue.
Or are we not feeling it? We know it's there, but we don't feel it, so it doesn't push us to do what is necessary.
I mean, if they give me $1 million, I'll do something about it. You see, that's the greed. Yeah. Now, all jokes aside, we luckily conversations like this is happening in other places. And
exactly.
That shows how far we've come from, and hopefully
and how concerned we are about the situation we are in now.
Exactly. Hopefully we can create that African concept and African identity. Okay, that's a long conversation we had. We hope we've done our best, and we hope people actually agree or do not agree. If you don't agree with us, if you have your opinions, you can always contact us. You can always come on the show. Everyone is invited as long as you write to us on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you can actually see us. The African Experience Podcast will always be the African Experience Podcast. Thank you for listening. Yeah, you want to conclude, bro?
No, I just want to thank our listeners. We've already said what we are going to say. The rest is now. We leave that to them. Yeah. And we thank them very much for listening to us.
Yeah. We'll call it today. And bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the African Experience Podcast. For show notes, visit us on www.theaexppodcast.com and follow us on social media at the AEXP Podcast.